my question was the rejection of compensated emancipation in Delaware chiefly out of a fear of, like, racial equality, or was there also an aspect of political gain on the part of the Democratic Party?
Yeah, well, that's an interesting question because, as you know, there were only about 1,800 slaves in Delaware. Delaware slavery was pretty much kaput, although 1,800 slaves, there were slave owners, etc. Yes, and Lincoln, of course, first broached this possibility of emancipation to Delaware in late 1861, and they rejected it. And oddly, of course, slavery survives in Delaware longer than any other place in the Union except Kentucky, all the way to December 1865, when the 13th Amendment is ratified, because the emancipation doesn't apply to Delaware because they were in the Union. It's against the Confederacy. You know, why did they reject it? Lincoln said, we'll colonize these people, so it's not like fear of free blacks, although they may have thought, well, these blacks are not going to go, but 1,800, what's the big deal? You know, it's not like a giant mob of people. I think Democrats felt a political advantage in sticking to slavery, although it was also pro-union, even Republicans who were opposed to it. I think you have to accept the premise that slave owners do not want to give up their slaves. I mean, fundamentally, that's why there's a civil war in the first place. Slavery is not just another form of property. That's why this notion of compensation doesn't really work. It's not like, I don't know, let's say I'm a farmer and the government wants to build a road through my farm. You know, they can do that. They can seize it for eminent domain, right? They pay me for my land, and they build a road. And I'd be pretty annoyed. Hey, I got this farm, I don't want a road, but the government can do that. They get my compensation. And then I said, well, what am I going to do with this money? Maybe I don't want to farm anymore. Maybe I'll invest in some enterprise or a startup company. I don't know. Slave owners aren't like that. They want to be slave owners. They don't want the money. They don't want to go into other things. Owning slaves is a complete culture. It's a complete way of life. It's a society. It's not just an investment. So nowhere in this, you know, it's not just Delaware. Kentucky rejected it. Missouri, everybody rejected it. Lincoln brought this plan over and over again to the border states. Maryland rejected it. They don't want to give up their slaves. I'm sorry. Slave owners want their slaves. That's what they are. If they don't have slaves, they're no longer slave owners. That's their identity. So, I'm sorry, wherever slave owners are powerful, slavery is not going to be ended peacefully, even with monetary compensation. Where they're not powerful, it can happen, like in the British example, right? In 1833, the British Parliament abolished slavery throughout the British Empire, particularly the Caribbean, but that's thousands of miles away. And the slave owners in the Caribbean did not have the power in Parliament to prevent it. Now, they did get a lot of compensation. The British paid them off with an enormous amount of money. But in the U.S., the slave owners they do not want any plan that will, you know, and I think if we think of the Civil War, you know, Civil War is a horrible thing. 700,000 or more people were killed. Terrible. You show me a scenario to get rid of slavery in this country peacefully. There is none. If Delaware, with 1,800 slaves, will not accept Lincoln's compensated gradual emancipation plan, how is Mississippi going to agree to get rid of slavery? How is South Carolina, Georgia, Alabama going to agree to get rid of slavery? Nope, they never will. Sad to say. So, you know, that's why there's a civil war. It's a terrible thing, but it rid the country of this horrible institution.
But you talked about the debates you had with Professor Oaks about Confiscation Act. So why don't
Debates? I don't know they were debates exactly. We were trying to figure out what, because the Confiscation Act is a very confusing law.
So we have some people that.
So yes, maybe you have it figured